have a question that leads me to ask Monica about what do you do? How do you take time for yourself, right? Especially when the demands on your time and your talents continue to increase, or the things that are going on in society kind of weigh on you. What is it that you're able to do to alleviate some of that?
I work on prioritizing my self-care time. I schedule all my homework and everything from Monday to Saturday. And Sunday will be a day for me where I can sit in the house and do nothing, watch Netflix, have a bottle of wine, or if I go to my friend's house, we'll do homework together, but I'm not gonna try to do a lot for somebody else on this one day that I choose to have for myself. If somebody needs something and I know it'll be a little quickie, but most of the time I won't answer the phone for my mom on the Sunday because she will. My mom knows Sunday is my day, and that will be the day she'll call me and be like, oh yeah, you're not working, I know you're not gonna go anywhere, you're gonna be home. And she'll pull up to my house and be like, I gotta go here, 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 here. And I was like, well, it's hard to tell her no. So I just have to not answer the phone. And that's another thing. I need to work on telling people no. I have an issue with that because I feel like, oh yeah, I can do it. Yeah, and I'll tell them yes before I look at my schedule. It's like, oh, maybe I should not have said yes, but I have to. And if I look at my schedule, I have a time slot where it's for every 30 minutes. I try to break it down to that minute detail, at least a 30-minute window. And that just helps me stay on task. My Sundays are my lazy days. When I love it, I'll go on hiking when it gets a little warmer, or I'll have a bubble bath. I love bubbles. A bubble bath, movies, and just try to turn my brain off for a little bit. Not think about my next assignment that's due, or not try to think about, oh, I'm supposed to turn in this paperwork. Just have time to think about what I have gone through that week and make sure I'm okay.
I like that. And I understand, you know, it can be hard to tell people no. When my children were young, I hated to say no. And so I always said maybe. And they'd be like, can we do this? I'd be like, maybe we can do that. Or maybe we'll get a chance to do that. And then I'd be able to work through, is that something that we can do? And so I encourage all of you to say maybe. And then when someone asks you, can I do this? Maybe I can. And that gives you time to go look at your calendar and follow up with people and give you the strength to go back and say, no, I'm going to have to tell this person, no, I don't really want to say no. But I'm going to have to say no. So you can psych yourself up in that mirror, and then you can say no. It's a good word, just like yes, right?
Just don't say that to your instructor.
Yes. Good words of advice right there, right? You know, yes to assignments, no to on your time if you can't get things done, right? And so the next question is for Ms. Bird, and it talks about what suggestions you have for women afraid to speak up for themselves and others when they're experiencing or seeing injustice, or to celebrate their success or other success. And if there's anything else that she really wanted to expand on when it comes to some of the images that we've been seeing. As Ms. Bird has said, she is the president of the NAACP, and her words of wisdom are always appreciated.
Thank you. In terms of speaking up, I would say if you're afraid to speak up, to get behind somebody that's not afraid to speak up. I'm not afraid to speak up. I, again, encourage you to lean on the resources in the room. John Griffin, Dr. Jackie Forte, Tracy Fox, Denise Metcalf, Nellie Baru, Glenn Stovall, Curtis Martin. All of these people are not afraid, I know are not afraid to speak up, as well as everyone on the panel, because if you were afraid to speak up, you wouldn't be here. So in speaking up, there's many different ways. For example, in response to what happened in Memphis with the beating of Tyree Nicholas, and his funeral is going on right now as we speak. As a matter of fact, I was getting dressed and trying to listen to part of it, and then I had to rush over here. I didn't really understand why my eyes kept getting so watery. When I first saw you, I said, do you mind if I get a tissue? And I think it's because of the emotional impact of once again seeing a senseless crime. And I challenged myself to say, well, what are you going to do about it? Because it's not what happens, it's what we do about what happens. So in one of the things the NAACP is planning is a rally on February the 18th down at City Hall in that plaza outside to talk about changing the culture of police reform, changing the culture of police through police reform. And so what I want students to understand is that you don't have to have a lot of permission and things to speak up. That's your right as an American citizen. You have the right to say something. And if you don't say something, then you end up becoming part of the problem. So if you're afraid to speak up, find somebody that you trust that's not afraid to speak up. In fact, there's a young lady in the room that I invited to come, and she has an organization called Stand Up, Speak Up, and Speak Out. Andrea Lisbon. Can you raise your hand? Okay. So again, that's another resource if you're afraid to speak up. And your voice is very, very important because no matter what the subject is, there's only 3 types of people in the world. There's people that watch things happen, there's people that make things happen, and there's people that wonder what happened. And if you're not at the table, if you're not speaking up, it's probably because you're going to be on the menu. I encourage you to speak up, always. And if you're afraid, come and see me. I'll speak up for you.
I just want to add something about, what you just mentioned about Tyree and the funeral happening right now. I don't think that, well, I know that for mothers with black sons, people have no idea of the fear we have when our children leave the house on a regular basis. So when my son was here for the winter break, he goes to Morehouse in Atlanta, all black male school. But when he was here for a break, he would often go to the Bay Area, hang out with his friends. But the fear of until your child is back in the house underneath your roof is a sigh of relief. And I don't think anyone else can talk about that experience because you fear, you're just thankful your child came back home alive. It is sad that we have to have that mentality as a black mother. I just want to share that.
And I'm going to even expand on that idea and thinking about how you have to tell your children about, make sure you're doing this and make sure you look this way or make sure if this happens to you that this is the things that you say. It's having to prove that they're respectable, having to prove that they're a person, right? Having to have people see their humanity. And so I have that same fear when my son leaves the house or when my daughter leaves the house, if they're going to come back. And I'll tell a story about when my son was in high school, he participated in, I think it's the DARE or the drunk driving or something like that, where the children go away for a while and the parents have to write a letter as if they've been in a car crash. And so me and my husband were sitting here thinking, what are we doing with this? People aren't scared every time their kids leave the house. Okay. And so then we went to the event and a lot of parents were upset and they were talking about how they wouldn't know what to do if something happened to their child when they left and so forth. And in my home, when my son came back, I go, I feel like this every time you leave the house. I go, so for me, this exercise was a little bit of a relief because you were over at the firehouse playing video games while everybody else was acting like you weren't alive. I said, but every time you step foot outside of my door, I worry, are you going to come home? And so I don't have to replay this theme to be afraid of what's going to happen. And I think it's important for people to understand that our sons are our sons, right? They're beautiful, they're kind, they're wonderful, they're gentle, they're hardworking, they're caring. They're all the things that you believe that your sons are. And so what we are asking for is for them to be treated the same way. And we're not asking through anger or through anything else, although sometimes that does come about, because you can see why we are upset. And so I just appreciate the mothers on this panel, and the aunties on the panel, and the cousins on this panel who are letting you know that the pain that we see whenever we see a picture like that is the pain that we feel for our own children, for our own community members. And the only way that this can change is if you do what Ms. Bird is saying. You speak up. We're speaking up. We're doing a lot of conversations. We're marching a lot. Let me tell you what that means. I marched. Well, wait. My grandchildren marched. I marched. My children marched. My parents marched. Their parents marched. Eventually, we need to get to a point where we don't have to march. And that's on everybody in this room to make happen.
And to add on to that, marching is great and it's good, but if you don't vote, you're just doing a step show. So you've got to follow up. You got to follow up with voting. Voting is your biggest and best voice.
Some of these gyms, you need to write that down. If you're just marching and you're not voting, you're just doing a step show. If that's not a t-shirt or something that needs to happen, I don't know what is. That is excellent. Okay, and so let's go on to our next question. Thinking about managing your time and all of those things, and when things get difficult and you start thinking, can I continue to do this? Do I want to continue to do this? Can I wake up and make it to school even though I'm feeling however I'm feeling? This next question is for you, Ms. Porter. What sense of purpose or mission or duty guides you in your life so that you can continue to keep pursuing? And those of you who need to leave for class, we understand, we appreciate you coming. So don't be embarrassed to get on up. Put your little finger up. You guys don't know nothing about that. Go ahead and put your finger up and just walk out the room so that we know that you're not being disrespectful. That's a little hint for y'all. If you go to a black church, you gotta leave, you gotta put your little finger up so people know. So they know that you're just trying to get out. All right, Ms. Porter.
I grew up in East Oakland, Oaktown, and I had a great childhood. And the reason for that great childhood is I was raised in a community that was sold out to making sure every child had the opportunity to succeed. My mom was an advocate for the community where I lived. And our community was a village. We took care of one another. And that saying, no child left behind, I grew up hearing that constantly. No child was left behind. The parents in my neighborhood, they advocated for us. And because my mother was an advocate, I'm an advocate, and I'm a mom today. And so my motto is, if I can reach one, I can teach one. And I heard that long time ago, and it has stayed with me forever. So I always get involved, and my mom, she always taught our siblings, if you want to complain about something and you don't do anything about it, you might as well keep your mouth closed. But if you want to do something about it, you open up your mouth and you become an advocate for what you want. The only way you're going to make a change is you got to open up your mouth. So I try to reach one and I teach one, and I love young kids. So I love unconditionally, and I care about what they do. I just spend time with them. So my job is, I heard this motto a long time ago, and I think it was at the Berkeley Repertory Theater. The more you know, the more you owe. So when God has blessed me with blessing, I try to be a blessing to another person. Another thing that I learned growing up with my mom is, whatever I wanted to do, if I saw someone in a position of where I wanted to be, I would go and talk with them and ask them questions. How do I get to where you are, right? And so asking questions, getting involved, volunteering, but just being an advocate and just really striving to not be selfish. But if you see a need, get involved and help those around you.
I really like that, especially because I'm the peer services director, and I'm always telling people, it's not only what you know, but who you know, right? And so if you're not making sure that you're networking with people, you're having conversations with people, you're finding out who are those people that are on the road that I'm trying to get on, and reaching out to them so that you can possibly drive together, then you're selling yourself short a little bit. And I can understand that it can be a little fearful to reach out to people, but like Ms. Bird was saying, go up to someone that you know already and you feel comfortable with and say, listen, I want to reach out to somebody, but I'm feeling a little nervous, so sit with me while I make this call. Or walk up with me while I have this conversation with someone. Use your resources. That's something my mom and dad used to tell me all the time. And I come home and go, well, I couldn't do it. They go, use your resources. So use your resources. That's your faculty members here. That's your staff here. Those are your friends, your family members. Ask people, do you know someone in this field? Do you know someone who's doing this? How can I get involved? There's always a place for you, right? And that really leads me to managing that whole world of work. And so this question is for you, Dr. Wilson. How do you successfully manage the world of work? And especially as an African-American woman, how do you manage, and at the executive level, how are you managing all of these things that you're having to do every day?
That's a lot. In managing that work very mindfully, strategically, and methodically. You kind of heard me say that already. But I have to be very observant of the room and mindful of my reaction in that room, because often I'm the only person who looks like me. And as she mentioned, as Deshawnay mentioned, my poker face, I'm never going to put all my cards on the table. But trust and believe, my mind is thinking, next step strategically, what I need to do. But I can't come off in the room as the angry black woman or the woman trying to defend everything. I have to be very mindful, and because we get these labels. So if I gotta argue for everything, then I become the bee in the room. Then I become this or that. So being very mindful of that. And probably because I have a counseling background, I will sit and listen a lot before I respond. Because sometimes we're quick to respond and not really having that clear, concise information to share, where it's not going to be received as a threat or a concern. You have to be mindful of that. So the poker face is a reason for that. It's in certain areas I can be very different, but I really have to be mindful of certain things. The challenges of being in that space is cultural taxation, because you can't rep every black thing all the time just because I'm a black person. So that can be exhausting. So as you talked about marching all over the place, you get tired. But also because I'm the VP of Student Services, I can't only rep one group because I'm responsible for all the students. So no, I can't go to every major event. I have to support LGBTQ, undocumented, international students. So I have to be very mindful that I'm not showing favoritism one way or the other, but it's about what I'm doing for all students. So that cultural piece where, and it's fine, you can't be at everything all the time, but there's a way for your voice to be in the room even when you're not there, if that makes sense. But I have to be transparent about that too, and just say, this is what the deal is, this is why I can't do something, this is why I can do something, but being very mindful of optics too. So if someone's inviting me to something, one example is a presentation on diversity, wanted me to do it with another African American woman. Well, why? Because the optics of that, we're the quiet. I need an ally in that space to present to the folks who need to hear, because my people are going to hear it just fine. So being very mindful of how stuff is delivered, because sometimes you need an ally to deliver something, because people tend to listen to people who look like them. So being very mindful of that too. So again, I mentioned several times here that I'm very strategic in how I do things and how I function, because it's necessary. Because it's very necessary. Being mindful of that. And when it comes to politics, not even trying to play politics, because it's not about me or my opinions. It's about we and what we do as an institution. So for me to show data, to show something in black and white that says this is why we need to do this, to show the pros and cons of how it leans my way more than one way or the other, is what you have to do. And I'm very mindful of that too, but I can't and will not play the politics game, because it's about doing what I'm here to do, not trying to defend what I do and why. But again, if you have the data and things to back it up, just like Richard, if you open up all these spaces, there's going to be some haters to say, why this group needs this, why this group needs that. Again, if there's an equity gap, clearly we need something because something hasn't been working. But to be able to show that data, who's going to argue with it? So that's how I play politics. I'm going to play it in black and white with the data to back it up. So I'm very much about having plan A, but having plan B, C, D, and E as well, just to be over-prepared for everything that's going to come at me. So being mindful of that.
you see why with that answer, we only play red light, green light with Dr. Wilson. Right? But I love the idea that you said that you're observant of what's in the room, right? That is a skill that you should try to hone. When you're having a conversation, or when you're in front of the room, or when you're talking about something, what is the body language going on? How are people looking at you? Are they nodding at you, or are they looking like, why are we still here? Are they engaged with you, or are they ready to go, right? I would always tell people, I am not the smartest one here, that is for sure, but I'm really intuitive. And I can figure out what's going on with people, and I go with my instincts. And so I encourage all of you to do the same. Observe what's happening in a room. Don't just keep going, thinking that you should go. You might have to make some changes in between. You might have to change something up. Know how people are reacting to the words that you're saying. That's really important for you. And this next question, Dr. Hunt, I'd like to ask you, and it's kind of about work and all of those things. What challenges have you faced? And how have you overcome those challenges? And just to let the panel know, we're going to have a little bit of time, so you may have some time to get in some things that you didn't get a chance to say, or we'll have some questions for the audience. But for right now, Dr. Hunt, what challenges have you faced, and how have you overcome those challenges?
So, one of the major, I think, there's a few. But it's one that is exhausting and tiring for me right now, is always having to prove I know what I know, or that I'm qualified. Working at bedside, when I was a respiratory therapist, working at bedside, sometimes going into a patient's room, and then even questioning whether or not I could do what I was supposed to do, right? And I'll relate to you an experience when I got into the master's program. It was after 10 years. I had lost my daughter, and it was 10 years before I went for the master's program. And I didn't even have a computer. A friend took me down to Circuit City, that's how long ago it was, to get a computer. And I went to the instructor. It was a personnel class where we had to talk about the laws and justice. And I went to the instructor because she required us to do a presentation on PowerPoint, and I'd never done it. And I just went up to her and said, I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed. And she said, you can't do this. This is an instructor telling me, she's going to talk about justice and equal rights. And she tells me, you can't do this. This is too much for you. It's too much for you. And I went to my counselor and I told her, and she was my instructor in another course. And she said, no, if I have to cut back on, give you longer time to turn in your homework, I'll do that. And I returned to the class, the next class period, and the instructor said to me, you're still here? This is an instructor, a teacher, it's supposed to be. And I said, yes, and I'm staying in this class, and I'm getting an A. And that's what I did, to the point where it made me almost physically sick to study, because I was not going to allow this woman to just look at me and decide that I'm not able to do this. And I'm telling you folks, it continues, because